I'm primarily known as a collector, looking for the cleanest, most original examples of rare guitars. However, I can also appreciate gizzardry when I see it. That's guitar wizardry. This restoration caught my attention. Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. I always love getting old beat-up cases that have a bunch of stickers of cool bands and radio stations, because inevitably there's someone in the comments section that has a great tale about K-Knack, so I look forward to reading your memories of them. But from Boss Pedals to Megadeth to Exodus, Kirk Hammett's band before Metallica, it's very appropriate that we have an 80s Flying V in here. Nice. Okay, so I took a bit of a gamble buying this because you can never tell how good a restoration is by photos alone, because some refinishes feel good, other ones feel like crap. So what do we have here? It feels good. Gotta smell it a bit. Does it smell too fresh? Nah. 100% Gibson quality. It's like 80 to 90% of the way there. This is actually really nice. So, Bahama Blue is a really cool color that Gibson used in the very early 80s. And even though this is a refinish, it actually started life as Bahama Blue. But we'll talk more about what happened to this thing over on the Workbench, but let's learn a little bit about Flying V history. Last week we were talking about a bunch of cool different Flying Vs, and we learned how the original 58 style would look something like this. It has a really wide body with a string-through tailpiece and great gaudy Gibson logo, and the body itself is much thicker than later releases. After its original small run that didn't see much success initially, the Flying V's first full year being brought back is 1967, where they changed things up. They slimmed down the body, they give you a vibrola or a stop bar tailpiece. Instead of the gaudy Gibson badge, we get the introduction of the 3-screw truss rod cover, and they also change up the dimensions of the rest of your headstock. But the biggest thing is they're no longer Carina, they're mahogany. But I am a huge fan of 70s and early 80s Flying V because they changed the construction even more. I'm not exactly sure when this happens, but on these guys, the neck is hoisted straight out of the body, which means your pickups have to be really high up. That's why it's very common for people to add pickup rings on top of your existing pick guard to get the pickups even higher. Otherwise, you still have the thinness of a 67's body, and normally I wouldn't like a neck that's hoisted up like that, but for whatever reason, on the 70s and early 80s Flying Vs, it makes them magic, in my opinion. I've always been a big fan of the natural ones as well, because you can find them as a matching headstock, as well as that blue one that we're talking about today. But if you want to check out an original early 80s one, you can click this episode right here to learn more about that. Or if you want another fun makeover of one of these, this is another good episode that you might consider, but it was modified heavily and basically became the V. And I'm pretty confident this was an Ed Roman conversion. But as we were talking about finishes, this one was a poly refinish. You can tell it just looks a little bit more plasticky. I'll have to confirm with the restorer if he used nitro or not, but so far it looks pretty good and it feels nice. Let's go ahead and throw it onto the Workbench, because here's where things get interesting. Inside our blue friend, this guitar is the exact reason why most professionals will tell you you should be paying about 50% less than a all-stock original example if it's been refinished. You can hide a lot of sins under paint, because just looking at this, it looks fine. It's just some goofy refin because maybe somebody didn't like the aged version of the finish. I mean, our headstock's looking good too. I don't see anything snapped off or broken. We got a beautiful looking serial number. Here's what this used to look like. Beautiful dark age with black plastics and, yeah, that's right, a Floyd Rose. Now here's the funny thing about Floyd Rose equipped guitars. That's not just a top route. They also require a back route. And do you see any of that? Nope, that'd be hard to know. Paint can hide a lot of sins, and whenever somebody's trying to hide something, it's always a solid finish. So be especially leery of those. And even when it is a transparent finish, make sure you look closely. For example, on the 81 The V, a lot of people missed that it actually had different tuners on it right here. You can still hide stuff while being honest. But my personal philosophy is as long as the original serial number is still there, and it plays well and it's priced well, you're good to go. But if that's ever missing, that opens up a whole nother can of worms. Because then you have to think morally. That guitar was most likely stolen at some point, but everybody uses the excuse, oh, back then we didn't care about serial numbers. There's no way to know. If there's no serial number on your guitar that originally had it, usually 9 times out of 10, I will stay away from it. I don't know about you guys, but I think that V actually looked pretty cool. But here's what the backside looked all chopped out. That definitely does not look professional. This backplate, you can tell, was like extra ultra thick, and they just crudely chopped out a square right there. I'm not exactly sure what this is about. There had to have been something stuck to it at some point, because that's not a route. But it had Dunlop strap locks. And then, oh, hey, what's going on here? We've got some sort of a stinger put on it. And is our serial number scratched out? No, it's been excavated. So the reason for this dark green finish is, yeah, there's a headstock repair here. And when it was refinished, the serial number was hard to read, so they had to get rid of all the paint. And then with most Floyd Rose-equipped guitars, you also needed a lock nut system, which typically requires routing out some of the top of the guitar to install properly. However, on this Flying V, I'm not sure if they exactly had to do that, but we definitely had some screws drilled into our neck. This is how the previous owner picked this guitar up from a guy in Las Vegas, and he made the decision to restore it. So our headstock goes from looking like this to having a brand new maple cap put on it. This hides all the sins and helps prevent future witness lines from occurring, and allows us to put a normal nut on here, and then once you put the new Bahama Blue finish on top of it, you won't see any of the previous stuff from the lock nut. He was feeling particularly saucy and wanted to upgrade the fretboard to what he claims is Brazilian rosewood. So here you can see that in its raw form with the fretboard taken off. I'm not sure if he had to do any truss rod saving or anything like that, but we at least know that's been replaced. But now for the big one. It looks like he just put an entire new block of mahogany in here, and he said he was trying to save the original blue finish because looking at it, it was actually in pretty good shape, but he couldn't blend it properly, and that's because aged clear coat versus not, so I can see why he eventually had to redo the whole thing. But that was about the extent of the photos when I first purchased it. I thought somebody had colored it, but no, sure enough, there is a giant route back here that he filled in and then covered over in the refinish. And then you saw we had a whole bunch of different tuners on it at one point, so we filled those in during that process. And now what I haven't told you, there's a headstock repair. However, I love great headstock repairs like this. He's essentially just replaced the entire piece of wood back here to give it more strength. Now you could also go the spline method, but he said this was improperly repaired with a whole bunch of epoxy and it was really ugly. So he cleaned it up the best he could, but we can definitely still see some sort of a crack going on here, but it has certainly been reinforced. And I love great repairs like this because I strummed this a little bit before I took it apart and it still feels good. And that's the big thing. So paint hides a lot of sins, and that is why I wanted to document this piece. Because I still think this turned out fantastic, but the rest of this episode is going to be dedicated to, showing you, some of the things that didn't exactly go right during restoration. But let's start with what pickups we've got in here. There's actually really nice stuff. We've got a patent number Gibson pickup, so there's 2 different things this could be. That could be a mid-70s T-top or a Tim Shaw. It looks like some modifications have been made to the legs to make them fit again. We got a whole bunch of solder over here to put a new inset on it, so that's good and slightly error correct. And then, hey, look at that. A very early March 7th of 1980 dated Dirty Fingers. So a nice PAF and then a double row of adjustable pull pieces Crazy Boy in the bridge. That's one of the early Dirty Fingers that still has the T's on the tops of the bobbins. So ultra hot 1579 in the bridge. Let's see where our neck's at. 763, okay, so it doesn't look like anybody's messed with that. That reads about right. And then the middle, 5.13. Now our soldering work might not be the cleanest, but as far as the pots, we've got a 5th week of 1979, and the other ones are too covered over to tell, but they look very similar. So error correct, believe it or not. Then we've got our toggle switch and output jack. And here's how the cavity routes look today. They just have a fresh coat of paint on them, but they're still the correct backwards D-shaped, and then a long rectangular one. But now the big question, can you actually see witness lines of where he filled it in? If you know to look for it, you can kind of see it right there. And then from this particular viewing angle right here, you can definitely see it. I've always hypothesized, similar to what he did on the headstock, if you put a new piece of wood over top the entire thing and then sanded it really nicely on the edges, you could potentially hide that even further. Most guys don't go that far to future-proof the repair, but the point I'm trying to drive home here is You never know what's hiding underneath a solid color finish. But it's now been restored to an ABR1 style bridge and stop bar tailpiece studs. What was funny is he said the Floyd rose that was on it, somebody had completely blocked it off. So it was just acting as a stop bar tailpiece. So that's why he decided to just fully restore it. The other thing you have to worry about is what was refinished even authentic to begin with, because some guys will take Hondos and dress them up, try to make them look good. I bought this because I had 100% confidence in it, and I still do. This was pretty much what I was hoping for. I never expect perfection on refinishes, but I've also had a lot of them that are like spray paint rattle can jobs that just feel awful. This one matches and or exceeds my expectations for your average refinish. It feels good, but it was definitely not polished up to Gibson standards, but that might have been on purpose, because it also looks to me that it was intentionally lightly aged, or maybe these are just imperfections within the finish. It's hard to say, but it's kind of cool. Maybe while he was buffing, he took it too far, and that's why you get a different color along the edges. But at the same time, that's actually really cool, because that's the original Bahama Blue peeking through. You can see that in many areas along the edge of the guitar. So again, that might have been intentional. There's a little bit of that up here, and a whole lot of that over here on this edge. Gives it a cool painted over vibe. And as far as our knobs, these aren't the original ones, but it's an original style witch hat with our regular 3-way toggle switch and output jack on the front. And here's a look at that bridge. It's an ABR1, however, this is a modern day reissue, not a vintage one. Same thing's true for our tailpiece. It's a modern one. Full weight. I was telling you how thin these bodies are. The 70s one, I measure about 1.38, but if you see how far it sticks up with frets, it's about 1.9 inches. So those necks just stick up there. And normally I don't like guitars like that. Like, I'm not a big fan of the E2 CMTs. They're beautiful guitars, but the hoisted up neck makes them feel weird. There's something about the 70s, 80s Flying Vs where for some reason it just works. And it might come down to the mahogany construction versus maple of those other models. But now our fretboard. I did not notice this until after I had made an offer on it. The dot inlays were not so well installed. Look closely. They get really janky up here. Woo! At the middle of the 12th fret, these should be even. They are not. This one is a little bit higher. And then with a straight edge, that really shows how they got askew. However, there actually is a pretty good excuse here. It looks to me like maybe he had a CNC or a jig that was routing all this out, and it was slightly bumped up, because even these aren't like perfectly in the center, but as you run up the fretboard, that became more and more noticeable. You can see where there's a lot of filler around those inlays. So I think it routed it like right here by the fret, and he's like, well, that's going to look very strange. So he filled it in and put it in the wood as best as he could, which is a real shame that he went through the time to put a potentially Brazilian rosewood fretboard on here, put fresh new binding, frets, and all that. I bet it's one of those things where he didn't realize it until it was too late, and he's like, shoot. But most 70s, 80s Flying Vs do not have binding. This one actually looked like it might have left the factory with it. There were some variations, like for example, there's even one stock from the factory that has small block inlays. But from what I understand, that was a dealer exclusive run of about 50 guitars. Those are very collectible today. But here we can see we're back to a regular knot. That's the next cool thing about these. They have very narrow necks. So 1.56 inches. And it doesn't even hit 2 by the 12th. And our first fret neck depth is 0.79, but chunks up respectively to 0.97. So they're narrow, but they're actually fairly chunky, especially as you get up here. It's a very nice rounded C-shaped neck. Here's a good representation of that. Very narrow, but kind of chunky, and it does indeed widen up quite a bit as compared to up here. So even though it doesn't look like it's changed shape much, it feels much bigger here. Now, to be fair, I've never actually played an original 67 or a 58. I've only ever had the reissues, so maybe they're just as fantastic and I just haven't experienced true bliss. But in my opinion, the 70s and 80s, that's where it's at when it comes to these. They don't compare to anything modern. They've got their own special thing going on. And another thing, when you buy a refinished and restored guitar, you better make sure the truss rod works. And from what I feel here, it must have been reset, because that is brand new. So we have tightening direction, but not loosening. But here's a really good way to know if you actually still have a Gibson. Look for your acorn nut. If it's got one of those hex key wrenches all the way down here, that's how you know, nope, that didn't start life as a Gibson. But this is a reproduction of the Gibson 70s style truss rod cover. Got the reflective Gibson logo. And thanks to our new head cap veneer, you don't really see too much of any witness lines. Although if you look closely, this line right here is probably where the lock nut initially stopped. Or it could also just be something else. While stringing it back up, I noticed a few things. We do have some areas that wore down through to the bare wood over here. Again, whether that was intentional or accidentally by the buffing machine, I don't know, but I find it kind of cool and natural. I also noticed that the notches were never filed for our new bridge saddles, so keep that in mind. You might want to have that done. I remembered I forgot to check the fretboard radius. I would imagine it's 12. And if there was a guitar to check it on, it's a reworked one, but I'm sorry, I forgot. But 24 3/4 inch scale. I need to get myself one of the notched set of these for when I forget. Well, now we can move on to the backside. Normally, a Flying V wouldn't have too much going on back here. However, we do have some dings through the finish here. We got restored to regular strap buttons in our usual locations. And I was telling you earlier, the route is not immediately noticeable. At first, I didn't see it at all. However, if you know to look for it, you can actually see the outline here when you get it in the light just right. In fact, when you know to look for it, it's quite obvious. So if I were restoring this one, I probably would have put a complete new back veneer to this. So something to keep in mind. This would make a great project for someone like, hey, you don't care about the blue finish and you just always wanted a Flying V to refinish to your own specs. Like you need a Ferrari red one or some zebra prints. This is not a good candidate for a natural refinish because there are sins. I think some of the reason why it's so noticeable back here is it's not completely flush. It does come down just a tad. And again, that's nothing against the workmanship of this guy. It's, hey, I'm reviewing this because I will eventually be putting it in my store, and I try to make the online buying process as easy as possible, especially when buying a refinished guitar. And if you look closely, the finish looks a little bit different, but that's way more evident in the camera than it is in person. But we also have other nicks and dings back here. Oh, a nice player's grade piece this one is. He did not mention or show anything about the heel being damaged, so I think we're good there as far as the Gibson neck set. But man, this neck will look cool once you start to wear through some of this new Bahama Blue to reveal the aged one. Just don't remove it here. But this is what's scary to me is I know that there's a headstock repair here and I cannot see witness lines of it. So just because a refinished guitar looks good on the back, that's why we have the blacklight test for. The only thing I see a witness line of is this bottom line of the backstrap piece. It just looks like a straight across scratch in the neck, but it's not. I thought this was a nice touch. He actually went through the troubles of restoring it with error correct tuners. They must have been in the case or something. I'll be honest, they don't feel great, but they do have some good value to them. And that's what I love about this is the tuners look right, the pots are right, and you've got error correct pickups. So in theory, it should sound fantastic yet. It's just everything else has been replaced, including some of the bodywood. But he did a fantastic job of keeping that serial number being legible to the point where I could see how somebody might confuse this as the original finish. But the other cool thing about this one is it's Kalamazoo produced. That's what $4.99 or less tells us right here. And it was built in 1981, the 82nd day of the year. I was just talking about a blacklight test. When it comes to a full refinish though, they're not really that useful because if the entire thing was refinished at the same time, what the blacklight test tells us is how even is the finish. Now, if somebody's done a touch-up or a repair and they left everything else alone, that area that was fixed up will not glow. But like what we're seeing over here, the original finish is poking through, so it is glowing. So that would be one thing that could tip someone off as to why this one was refinished, as well as the witness lines. So hopefully you guys found this episode entertaining and useful in determining if a guitar is the original finish or not. I mean, there's a lot of things you have to use, and sometimes it just comes down to experience. How many of them have you held and felt? I mean, this one feels pretty good, but you can also tell something's off at the same time. But we've got some glowing going on over here. That looks more like somebody was playing this sweat absorption type thing. But we've got some original finish poking through here. And now our neck. Scary stuff up here. you don't see anything. Because again, all the finish was redone. All said and done, this one's pretty light. 6 pounds, 11 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. Something I notice about this is it's really acoustically resonant. Like, this is loud for an electric guitar. I've always hypothesized it's those large pickup routes underneath here kind of acting like an acoustic guitar. That gives it pretty good sustain. The neck pickup has a lot of bite to it. Which is a great contrast against our dirty fingers. I mean, listen to this thing. It's much darker sounding. But they play together like this. That neck pickup's really shining through. I'm tempted to lower it down a bit, but I do like that tone. Because it darkens up just a tad. That whole characteristic from here. But still maintains the chiminess. You don't find this configuration stock in any guitar, so it's refreshing to have something new. Now, for full disclosure, these original pots, they're a little noisy. I would imagine the other guy tried to clean them. So it might be it's just time to replace the pots for modern ones, but it works as is. So those are some fun tones. I would probably suggest cutting the nut just a hair lower, and I'm noticing the D string kind of binds on it a bit, so I have to keep retuning that. These top tuners, I would suggest replacing them. The treble side ones still feel okay, but probably just better to retire the old vintage ones, sell them off to somebody who needs them to restore it, and I mean, everything else has been replaced on this anyways, you might as well have better tuners. As far as the rest of the playability, the frets seem good. I did notice there's at least one high fret though. It's your 19th fret, because as you're playing the 18th, kind of chokes out, but if you add vibrato, you're good. The high part is right at the end, right before the fret nib. But maybe use that to your benefit. So there we go, an original Bahama Blue 1980 Flying V that was refinished back to Bahama Blue to restore it back from its former Floyd Rose days. What are my final thoughts on this one? I think this was a fantastic attempt to breathe new life into this particular guitar. Is it 100% Gibson quality work? No. The longer you have it, the more you see, oh, okay, yeah, there are seam lines everywhere and things like that. But I still would stand by. This is like 80 to 90% of the way there. It does need some fine setup work as far as the intonation, slotting those saddles, and fixing at least that one high fret that we saw and some fine tuning to the nut. But hey, at least we have really expensive vintage pickups in here and some cool tuners. So if you're interested in being the next owner of this Player's Grade 1981 Flying V, feel free to reach out. I'll have it on my website as well as probably Reverb. You can find those links in the description. Although, keep in mind, original 80s and 70s Flying Vs are very expensive, even in repaired condition. But they're excellent guitars and I could not recommend them enough if you're looking for the first Flying V to try. Or if you've tried other Vs in the past and you're like, I don't see what's so special about them. This is the one you want. Oh yeah, and did you notice this no longer has a volute? When they put that new wood in there, they shaved that down. So that's kind of a unique thing that we no longer have. Something else I noticed while playing is being a Kalamazoo guitar, if it had binding, it most likely would have originally had tortoiseshell colored side markers, which this one does not have, but the unbound ones would just have the white. That way it stands out against the rosewood. But what a fun journey this one was. All right, troglodytes, we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.